Leave that in.
Awesome, man. How did you first decide that you wanted to play music? Did you grow up in a musical family? How did that get started?
Actually, I did. Yeah, my father was a really great musician. He was a piano player, pianist, and he studied classical music, and he was a big jazz fan. So he had all of these records lying around, even way before I could even think about learning how to read or anything. I just hear all this stuff, and I used to be able to find these records just by the scratch marks on the labels and everything. You know, I'd be able to identify which record I was going to hear. And he was really amazing with his hands overall. He was a fantastic artist, great painter, great caricaturist, woodwork. He was a fantastic carpenter. He used to make all the toys around, and he made me my first record player, so he wouldn't have me messing with his. But he didn't trust me with some things. But so I heard all this music and I loved it, and I couldn't understand why I'd listen to something and I'd start feeling like I wanted to cry, you know, and I was like going, what's going on here? Then he'd play something else and I'd feel kind of happy or whatever, and then I just got all these feelings from music, you know, and so I never ever thought about playing a musical instrument. I just wanted to be someone who loved it because I just loved what it was doing, you know.
Yeah, I hear that.
So it was many years later when I started becoming interested in wanting to play a horn, a saxophone, because I started listening to a lot of saxophones because there was a lot of saxophones on his his records. But saxophones were pretty expensive back then, so I ended up with a guitar, and all I did was stand in front of the mirror with it, pretending I was Elvis Presley or something, you know. I didn't really have any interest in the guitar. I wanted something I could blow, you know. I didn't want a percussive instrument. He tried to interest me in the piano, and it just felt so alien to me. Like and and when I hear these great musicians playing it, it's so beautiful, and I love the sound of it. But it wasn't for me. I couldn't get anything out of it, and I guess he left the guitar around long enough. I started noodling with it because I realized I wasn't going to get a saxophone. So, but I never thought about ever being a professional musician. It never crossed my mind. And I absolutely did not start learning how to play the guitar because I wanted to pick up girls.
So guitar, now, when you found that you had a knack for the guitar, and you started playing in different bands, I mean, how does one go from sitting in their bedroom to, getting to the point where you're playing in some of the local bands in town?
Even that, as far as it seemed to be a bit of an accident, because I would remember going to these bars and my dad would take me in the pubs because there was a lot of music in pubs back in those days, like live music. And he would take me to these, and I was pretty tall for my age back then. I'm a midget now, how everybody's 6'7" now, 6'1" was pretty tall back then. So he would take me to all these pubs, and I started introducing me to the musicians. I remember I used to get kind of really excited and seeing all these little amps lighting up and everything. But back in the old days when they only had these little tiny combos and stuff. And he just would introduce me to the guys, and then my father would kind of start blowing my trumpet. He's going, well, he plays guitar, And that's how it started. Then I'd start getting a couple of auditions, and then after about 6 months, I ended up playing in a couple of local bands. And there was one band that came to the house and said, well, we're a professional band, and we want you to come and play with us. And it was like professional. I was going to me then, being a complete imbecile, I've been that way ever since also. I was going, no, wait a minute, this can't be right. You can't make money out of music, can you? So I didn't do it. But then I started working in these different jobs, bicycle shop, the basket works, making baskets. I liked that job, actually, it was good. And then a few mill jobs, and then I met this other guy who played in the band, and he offered me a band in his top 40, a guy called Glenn South. And that was my first kind of real professional kind of get paid to play gig, and it was really good because even though it was pop music, I got to be able to practice during the day, so it was a really good time. I did that for about 5 years, maybe less than that, maybe 3 or 4 years. And then through a saxophone player called Ray Worley, who came up on a musicians union tour to Sunderland, which is where I was playing, or actually Newcastle, the neighbouring towns. And then we went to went to like a little jam, and they said, oh, you can bring your instrument. So I took my guitar, and then after I'd played that, a couple of the guys came up to me and said, hey, can you give us your phone number? And then this one guy, Ray, said, I have a spare room at my flat, so if you ever feel like you want to come to London, you can stay there for free. So about 6 months went by, and I just kept doing the top 40 thing, and then I picked up the phone and I called him and I said, hey, do you remember me? He goes, yeah, sure. So off I went, and that was it. Then I moved to London.
The rest is history.
Pretty much. Including me.
Now, what was the first record you made? Was it the Tempest thing? Or
yeah, I did some things before that, but I'm not going to admit to any of them. So to me, the first album I did was Tempest. I'm going to stick to that.
Come on, you were on Perry Como.
No, and I tell you something that I wasn't on, just for the record, even though Donovan says I was. I never, ever played on Hurdy-Gurdy Man. It's not me. Okay. I've seen that in so many guitar magazines, that I played on that track, including one quote from supposedly Donovan that I did. I did not. Unless I was so drunk, I don't remember it, But I didn't play on that track. It's someone else. Got that one straight.
There you go, on tape. That's perfect. Now, after the Tempest thing, a few years down the line, we had Gong and a few other things. Tell me about those projects, because those were very ahead of their time.
Gong was interesting because I think I just finished. I was working with Tony Williams. I came over to play with Tony, which was obviously one of the highlights of my life, to work with such great musicians, and that's how I met Allan Pasqua. You know, unbelievable, and Tony Newton. So it was a great thing for me, but it financially fell apart. You know, and we kind of ended up getting stranded in San Francisco, and I sold my guitar to get back home, and then I had a manager at that time called Nicholas Powell, and he was one of Richard Branson's partners in the Virgin thing. And he introduced me to these guys, Gong. He said, "Man, we should try putting a guitar in this band." And so I went and played with them, and I enjoyed it. It was really great. I mean, they were good players. It was interesting, really interesting. 2 vibraphones. Drums, bass, guitar. It was a great, nice combination, and it was really good. What I remember about that band, no offense to any of the guys, was that after a while, if they'd get going, you know, like the French, you know, they could kind of maybe seem like a good argument or something. They get into these ferocious arguments, and it would all be in French, you know, and I couldn't speak French. So I just that would be my time that I could just leave and go to the pub, and they'd be all going at it, you know. Hopefully it'd be all over when I got back. But it was a good experience.
And through your acquaintance with the French musicians, is that how you hooked up with Jean-Luc Ponty?
No, actually, that was earlier. My hookup with Jean-Luc was after I played with Tony Williams. Apparently he heard the recordings that I'd made with Tony, and through his manager, Michael Davenport, at that time, he found me somehow and asked me if I'd like to come over and do this album with him, which was the Enigmatic Ocean record. And I did that. You know, obviously it was a great pleasure and an honor to do that, because he's a really amazing musician, and I really, really like him as a guy. I mean, he was just very nice to me. So, and it's always nice to work with people who are really nice to you, you know. I've had too many Buddy Rich stories, huh?
That's very true.
Are you digging it? Yeah, I'm digging it. Dig it all you want. It's your last night.
I thought that album was, at least in my opinion, that is probably his finest album. It's my favorite album.
Which one?
Enigmatic Oceans. I love that album.
Well, I liked it too, especially for the time, and it's really interesting for me to look back at, you know, to see what was going on and everything, the way the sounds changed and everything. Yeah, I enjoyed it. There's, you know, you listen to stuff later and you go, oh man, like, oh, ouch. But then you have to think, well, it was when it was, you know, so.
Yeah, it seems to me that music's just gotten so simple. I mean, there's no creativity. Not too many people are playing out of 4/4 anymore, and you know, whatever. Now, which came first, the Bill Bruford solo album or UK?
Actually, Bill's album came first for me, because I'd met Bill a few times. I had a couple of small groups I used to play with in London at various little pubs around, and I used to see Bill there, and then he approached me one day, and we lived close together. He was living in Richmond at the time, and I was living in Kingston, which is pretty close together. And he said, like, do you want to get together and like play a little bit or whatever? And he was working on an album, but there was no guitar on it at that point, which was the Feels Good to Me album. And I just kind of came in as a session guy, really. You know, I just was hired to play some guitar on it. And then I guess he was getting involved with the UK thing. So then they obviously Bill approached them and said, hey, if you want to add a guitar player to this band, maybe you should think about Allan, because he played on my solo album. And so they played him and stuff, and the other Eddie and John seemed to think it was okay. So that's how I got the gig with them, and we did the UK album and did some touring with them. And then after that, John and Eddie and Bill and I went our separate ways, and then I ended up doing Bill's second album, One of a Kind, which was actually a group at that point. I wasn't actually hired as just someone to play the guitar. I was actually a member of the band, you know. But that's after just after that, I guess I just kind of started getting the urge to have my own band, and I had all this backlog of music, and I just wanted to do that. And then I ran into Gary Husband. I met Gary Husband, and that was it. And when I played with that guy, it was game over. I was going, I want to play with that guy. But then, so we did, and then we couldn't get arrested. You know, we couldn't get a gig. That's how we came up with the name IOU, because it used to cost us to play. How much do you want for us to come and play your place? Yeah. And I'm not kidding. That's how it was. But
That's so funny. I didn't know that.
IOU. How much do you want? Can we play your place?
Now, did Gary obviously went off in a different direction, and you ended up with Chad? How did that happen?
Well, that happened because we all lived in England. The whole band was English, and Paul Williams was living in California. He was married to an American girl, so they lived in Tustin. You know, so when we first came over, we were all kind of hanging out at Paul's house. So then we did a lot of gigs. You know, we got a gig at the Keystone clubs in San Francisco, and the people who own the Keystone Club booked us up there for one night through Mike Varney, who was a big fan, and Mike Varney was instrumental in getting us our first gigs in California. He would contact all these clubs and say, I know you've never heard of these guys, but I'll guarantee you that you'll do pretty good business. So we went, and they were kind of really, really happy with what happened, because we went from playing these pubs in London to like 10 people to like 250 to 500 people in a small club, which is to us, it was like huge, you know. So and then each one of these the club owners would call another club owner. That club owner called the guy at Roxy, and he said, I know you've never heard of these guys, but give them a gig, and the same thing. So I went, well, maybe I don't want to go home. But so what happened is, basically I stayed there, and Gary and Paul went back to England. Paul Carmichael, the bass player. And then I went through this kind of semi-horrendous setup with Warner Brothers, which Eddie Van Halen, who's a wonderful guy, and he was really, really nice guy, great player, and he set us up with the people at Warner Brothers, and he got us a deal. But unbeknownst to me, they really didn't want me to do what I wanted to do, but I really didn't know that at the time. You know, it came later. So that's how Chad and Jeff came into the picture, because they were here. You know, so it was like, now I still play with Gary when we go to Europe, if he's not busy, you know. But to do local gigs, if the guy's on the other side of the world, it makes it a lot more difficult. So it was just a logistic thing.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Did you know Frank Zappa, or
I did know Frank. Yeah. I met Frank actually through Chad, because Chad was working with him, and I got invited to his house, and he was always really, really nice to me. I love that guy, and we all miss him, you know. Yeah. Ouch.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was something else.
Definitely.
I think mostly not from receiving stuff in the mail. I think it was more from people, people that had a relationship with the company, you know. And a couple of friends of mine that were acquainted with him took me to the older factory many years ago, maybe like 20 years ago, so I mean in the mid 80s or whatever. Yeah, I can't even count anymore. But it was a while ago. And that's how I first became aware of Carvin, and I was always convinced of the quality of their stuff, you know. And most people think, you know, well, if it's less expensive, it's not as good. But in actual fact, if by the time you've bought a guitar from a factory that's got a name on it, by the time it's gone from the manufacturer to the wholesaler to the retail to the store, that guitar's like going to cost a fraction of what it takes to make one of these, say. And yet this will come in, you know, a lot better quality for a lot less money overall. And I just found that with him. It's like most companies that you don't have to like everything, but if there's something that you really, really dig, then that's what you know. That's the stuff I'm going to use. And I approached him a few years ago now, maybe 6 years ago or something, and because I was getting most of my stuff custom made, but because the guitar builder is an amazing guitar builder, but he's a lot like me. He's too slow. You know, he doesn't get anything done. And getting old now, you know, you need to take out a life insurance policy before you can order a guitar. So the last one took a while. So that's how it started. I went to Carvin and said, "Could you make me a guitar? But just make me a guitar. I'll pay for it. You know, there's no problem. Like, I just want you to make me a guitar." And they said, "Sure." And then they said later on, you know, "Well, if we make the guitar and you really like it, can we manufacture it and sell it? You know, as opposed to it just being a one-off or 2 or 3 guitars for me." And I said, "Sure." And that's essentially what happened.
Now, when it came time to design your guitar, okay, how does one go about that? And what exactly were you looking for when you put that together?
Well, I was looking for something that was basically very similar to what I was already having made by Custom Guitar Builder. So it wasn't really that hard. It wasn't like I had to start with a brand new concept for it. You know, basically it was a semi-hollow guitar, and that's the sound that I like. You know, they're much more, to me, they have a lot more dynamic range than a, you know, especially if you're using distortion, than a guitar with a solid body. It's just the way it is. You know, I think anybody who's ever played a semi-hollow guitar knows that anyway. You know, like the guys who play 335s or any guitar that's got a hollow body, it's a different thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me about the Fat Boy.
Well, the Fat Boy actually was what I wanted them to, the way I wanted it to be built in the first place. But because it was kind of a learning curve and an experiment, you know, we started with this guy, which is hollow. But basically it's a solid body guitar where the body is hollowed out and then it has a top on it. And this guitar there's a top and a back. So I could put if there was no back or top, and I could put your hand right through it. And the bracing of the guitar goes like 2 little I-beams that run down the center of the guitar. And no part of the top, except from behind the bridge, touches the wood that's on the inside, on the front or the back. So it's pretty flexible. And it has, you know, that kind of more hollow characteristic to the sound, which I like. I got to figure out a way to cut the head off, though. I'm a big headless fan, but I'm talking to Mark about that anyway.
Now, what is it about that design that changes the tone? I mean, it's just a reverberation from the body itself, or?
Yeah, because essentially what it does is when you've got a hollow guitar, it actually slows down. It slows kind of slows down some of the attack. It doesn't slow down the initial attack. It slows down everything else, so it becomes more dynamic. You know, you can play a note softer and even with a distorted sound, and still get that kind of dynamic quality to it.
A little bit of both worlds, then.
Yeah, definitely. The only thing with this is obviously because of the Fat Boy construction, it was difficult to put a stock kind of tremolo on it. It would have to be something that's kind of more customized. So the Fat Boys don't have the vibrato bars on them, which is okay. You don't need it on everything anyway.
Yeah, it's true. Do you use any other Carvin products other than the guitars?
Yeah, I do. I love their power amps. I have a couple of the processors that they made, but that was this kind of old. I don't even know if they make those anymore. But mostly the power amps. I have another console, and I have a smaller console that I use for submixing some synthesizers. And but mostly the guitars and the power amps, essentially.
Let's talk about
That KB1000, I love that thing. It's great.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Let's talk about the KB1000.
Well, it's a really cool idea because it's designed for keyboards, so it has multiple inputs, which is not normal for a power amp, you know. And I just thought, oh, maybe I could experiment blending different amplifiers together at the power amp, you know. So yeah, it's a really interesting amplifier, and I love the way it sounds, and as I do with all of their power amps, I think all their power amps are great.
They're very quiet.
Yeah, they are. Power amps are though usually, but they're great. They just sound good, you know. It's,
The comments that I've been getting from all these people that I've interviewed is that the Carvin stuff is so robust, and they just never have any problems with it. Have you run across that as well?
yeah, I've never had any problems. Well, if I have, they were minor, you know. Well, you know, something that an airline is going to throw around, you know, around anyway, you might have a problem with anyway. But you know, those guys play football with it. The more fragile stickers on it you put, the more they're going to beat it up. It's like UPS.
That's perfect.
That's man. I got so much stuff from UPS. I hate to rag on UPS, but of all the equipment that's ever been sent to me my whole life, there's a 50-50 chance that if I get it from UPS, it's going to be broken. So if it's something fragile, I don't usually do that. Maybe they can fix that. Who knows? Sorry about that. Ouch.
I want to talk about the.
It's getting hot in here, isn't it?
It is. We're gonna wrap it up soon. I want to talk about Carvin, the company. It's been my experience that you know, the guys genuinely care, and they do treat everybody, whether you're Allan Holdsworth or Joe Schmo from Des Moines. You know, you get good attention. Attention to detail. I mean, you get a bunch of guitar players working there. It's hard to go wrong. So
Everybody that I've come in contact with at Carvin has been absolutely fantastic. You know, and it's a family-owned, family-run business. My relationship with Mark and all the stuff he's done, and having him annoy the CNC machinists all the time by telling them that I wanted to change something. You know, the guy goes, "Oh, not that guy again. He's going to change something." And but no, it's been an absolute pleasure. You know, it's been my absolute pleasure to work with them. They're absolutely great. Couldn't ask for more. You know, I mean, it's for anybody to have that kind of relationship with there's very few companies that I've ever been involved with. There may be one or two others, but I've never. It's definitely been a wonderful experience for me. So, thank you guys.
At this point in your career, you obviously could play anything you want.
No, I still can't do that. I don't expect ever to be able to do that either.
If you could sum it up in a quick sentence, I'm asking everybody the same question. With so many choices out there, why Carvin?
Well, like I said, my thing was because I had a distinct idea about what I wanted, and I approached them because I knew that my friend Bunny Brunel came over to my house one time and he showed me his bass, and I was blown away with it. I mean, it looked amazing, you know, and the workmanship and everything. I was looking at him and going, "This guitar's beautiful," and he goes, "Man, you should talk to them because they're right down the street at that time, before they moved." And that's when I got the idea that maybe these guys can build me a really nice guitar. And I just go over there and talk to them, and that's what I did. So it was easy for me, you know. I just had an idea of what I wanted, and I'd seen the quality, and I'd known Bunny many years, so it was the obvious thing for me to do. So that's what I did, and here they are.
Yeah.
Here we all are.